Back in 2024, Kamala Harris warned Trump will send the army after you. The Hill published an opinion piece calling her a liar. Back in those days, Republicans routinely accused Democrats of hysteria. And yet, here we are. Today, 700 Marines and 2,100 members of the National Guard are deployed in the city of Los Angeles. So far, we've heard conflicting explanations for why they're there. The main one, offered by Trump, is to quell a supposed insurrection, one that is absolutely not happening. The Homeland Security Secretary, Kristi Noem, claims the mission is to liberate the city from socialist leadership. That's her quote. Liberate the city from socialist leadership. I assume she's referring to the city's democratically elected leaders. Just before troops rolled in, largely peaceful protests were taking place. Demonstrations against the Trump administration's cruel and draconian immigration raids. Agents have arrested high schoolers, worshipers, leaving church services, workers on the job, anywhere that ICE agents decide to raid. The entire country has become an open battlefield in this war against migrants, ensnaring U.S. citizens, legal residents, and asylum seekers alike. Since returning to office, Trump has fired government watchdogs, taken over independent agencies, shredded public safety and health protections, and normalized grift and self-dealing. And now we're watching in real time. Tanks rolling into an American city, not to confront a foreign threat, but to intimidate American citizens exercising their constitutional rights. This is the moment where the line between democracy and autocracy disappears. But maybe more dangerous is the risk that we're getting used to Trump's attacks on democracy. Consider this. Never in our nation's history has a sitting U.S. senator from the opposition party been physically assaulted by federal agents. We're living in a time where elected lawmakers and sitting judges who challenge the president are being thrown into jail. You can't allow yourself to get used to this. You cannot allow yourself to think of this as the new normal. If you take nothing else from today's show, take that away. Let's be clear. The protests in L.A. were never an actual threat to Donald Trump or to the city. L.A. did not and does not need liberating. But that was never the point. Trump found a low-risk opportunity to manufacture a crisis to test the limits of his power. Can he deploy troops over the objections of local leaders and a state governor? Will the public push back? Will the courts push back? Will the Pentagon push back? Will soldiers push back? Trump has been inching toward invoking the Insurrection Act from the moment he took office, laying the groundwork early in an executive order. This week is the closest he's come. What this is not is a one-off. Trump's actions in Los Angeles are a blueprint. In fact, the memo authorizing the National Guard's deployment doesn't even name Los Angeles. It authorizes troop deployment anywhere that protests, quote, are occurring or are likely to occur, end quote. Or are likely to occur. No actual protest needed. It also quietly redefines what counts as an illegitimate protest in America, directly contradicting the First Amendment, which makes no such distinction other than stipulating that protests be peaceful. Remember, this is a time of peace. There's no uprising, there's no rebellion, and there's no insurrection. Only Americans exercising their rights. The memo reads, quote, to the extent that protests or acts of violence directly inhibit the execution of the laws, they constitute a form of rebellion against the authority of the government of the United States, end quote. Notice that it reads protests or acts of violence. Translation, peaceful protest can now be considered an act of rebellion if Trump says so. Nonviolent civil disobedience can now be met with military force. And if Trump decides unilaterally that a protest might inhibit law enforcement, that alone is enough to send armed troops into American neighborhoods. You cannot let yourself get used to this. And here's something else you should know about that memo. It doesn't invoke the Insurrection Act by name, but the language used in it is borrowed directly from the Insurrection Act. So while many in the media will be quick to point out that Donald Trump has not formally invoked the Insurrection Act, he already might have. This could be a de facto invocation. And the absolute worst thing we can do right now is to get bogged down in the legalese, whether or not the Insurrection Act appears on paper or has been legally invoked, because here's what really matters. Trump is already behaving as if he has those emergency powers. He's already pitting the U.S. military against its citizens. That alone is almost unprecedented in this country's history. That alone is dangerous, and you should not allow yourself to get used to it, because this might be the first time in our nation's history that we are seeing a preemptive military deployment against peaceful demonstrators. And if Donald Trump gets away with it now, while the stakes are still relatively low, he'll take it as a green light to go much farther when the stakes are actually high. Because the real challenges to his power are coming. The 22nd Amendment's term limits, a possible Democratic resurgence in next year's Congress, new investigations, and yes, a growing wave of mass resistance. This moment is about conditioning the public, softening us up for what's next, so don't allow yourself to be softened up. But nor should you face it alone. Political scientists Stephen Levitsky and Lucan Way argue that the only real check on authoritarianism is collective resistance. Quote, when organizations work together and commit to a collective defense of democratic principles, they share the costs of defiance. The government cannot attack everyone at once. When the costs of defiance are shared, they become easier to bear, end quote. When the costs of defiance are shared, they become easier to bear. This is a critical inflection point for this country. The cost of silence rises with every line that Donald Trump crosses. Crucially, journalist and Russia expert M. Gessen warns that the window for saving our democracy is getting smaller.
We know what we're dealing with. We're dealing with an anti-democratic force that aims to continuously reduce the space available for action, whether it's action by journalists or action by lawyers or action by academics, for any group of us to act in our particular fields. That space is shrinking. And so when we find our footing after a shock, to take stock of the space that's available and take advantage of all of it.
Now, historians may one day look back at this very week as a turning point, a fork in the road where the future of American democracy was either defended or lost. In his televised address on Tuesday night, California Governor Gavin Newsom warned, quote, California may be first, but it clearly will not end here, end quote. The goal, he said, is upending democracy itself. Speaking to The New Yorker, Pulitzer Prize-winning historian David Blight urges Americans to prepare by saying, quote, as a society, we have to take back our government. Yes, this means mass protest and a challenge to power that we have not seen since the 60s, end quote. After seeing footage of her colleague, Senator Alex Padilla, wrestled to the ground, the Republican Senator Lisa Murkowski of Atlanta responded with this, quote, it's horrible. It's shocking at every level. It's not the America I know, end quote. It's not the America we know, but it's the one we're fast getting to know. Let's stop it now, together. Joining me now is Thom Hartmann, host of the syndicated radio show, The Thom Hartmann Program, the author of numerous books, including The Hidden History of American Democracy, Rediscovering Humanity's Ancient Way of Living. Thom, I'm at once deeply fearful and incredibly hopeful. These protests and what we saw yesterday, the numbers we're getting from organizers say more than 5 million. I'm seeing a lot of people on social media saying it's at least double that number. I don't know what it is. We can't confirm that number just yet. But that's something. People are realizing that this collective defense of democracy is a thing.
I share your concern and your optimism, Hallie. Abraham Lincoln in the Lincoln-Douglas debates pointed out that public sentiment is everything. With it, you can do pretty much anything. Against it, you can do nothing. And if you consider that if 4 or 5 Republicans in the House of Representatives or the Senate or both were to simply say enough, we've had enough of this, and step back from authorizing Trump, essentially, to keep moving us closer and closer to autocracy, or to outright tyranny, frankly, they could stop him in his tracks. So it is so important that we all speak out continuously, that what happened over this weekend just be the very beginning. It's just the opening door, because I agree with all the brilliant people that you just quoted that this is, well, as Governor Newsom said, this is not just about California. It's going to go way beyond this before it gets resolved. I mean, we're only, 4 months, 5 months into this presidency.
There are people protesting regular people, in some cases undocumented immigrants, being arrested without due process. But I mean, they've arrested a couple judges. They've arrested the mayor of Newark. They arrested a member of Congress. They detained and handcuffed a United States senator. I mean, we've jumped the shark on this one. I don't understand why we can't get a few more Republicans to sort of say, I would like lower taxes and smaller government. I didn't sign up for this.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I mentioned the last time we talked that oligarchy is typically a transitional form of government. I wrote a book about it, The Hidden History of American Oligarchy. And it typically doesn't stand very long because, you know, oligarchy being basically when a bunch of rich people just take over a country and turn all the mechanisms of the country and all the devices of the country, from the courts to the industrial parts of the country to labor law, everything else, to their own profit, and to hell with democracy. And that when that happens, the people generally say, no, we don't want this, and start pushing back. And that's that inflection point. And that's where we are right now. You know, Jimmy Carter told me 9 years ago on my radio program that he believes that we, at that time, as this was right after the Citizens United decision, that we were in a full, you know, we were moving into oligarchy as a result of Citizens United. And I would argue that we have been there for a bit now, solidly. And I mean, it's been so long since any meaningful legislation was passed that benefits average working people. Pretty much everything is just for the top 1% against public opinion. And so at that point, the people start pushing back. And when the people start pushing back, the oligarchs, in this case, the billionaire president and the 13 billionaires in his cabinet and the 120 billionaire families who contributed over $1 billion to the last campaign for him, they have to make a decision. Are we going to bring down the fist, or are we going to back off? And so far, what we're seeing is the fist. And, you know, we saw that vividly yesterday in Los Angeles, where, as was so well documented by Jacob Soboroff right here on MSNBC, as without any provocation that I could see at all, and we were watching it in real time, you know, the sheriff's department started firing chemical weapons at people. So this is that moment. This is that decision moment for the country, for the oligarchs, and for all of us.